Hello everybody! Join us as we delve into the stories of rulers once deemed gods by their people. From Egypt's pharaohs to Japan's emperors, we'll explore how mortals were enshrined in myth and worship. So, let's begin. Naram-Sin of Akkad. Naram-Sin of Akkad, ruling from 2254 to 2218 BC, elevated himself to divine status, a rare feat for Mesopotamian rulers of his era. This unprecedented move was depicted in art and inscriptions, exemplifying his deification. The most compelling evidence is the victory stele of Naram-Sin, where he is shown wearing a horned helmet, a symbol reserved for deities, indicating his claim to divinity. Moreover, his military successes and expansion of the empire were considered proof of his divine favour and support, further solidifying his godlike status among his people. Worship practices including the erection of temples in his honour and the inclusion of his name in religious texts, paralleling those dedicated to the gods. Inscriptions from his reign suggest that he demanded rituals and offerings that were traditionally reserved for deities. Pharaoh Khufu. Pharaoh Khufu of ancient Egypt, best known for commissioning the Great Pyramid of Giza, was revered not just as a ruler, but as a deity. This divine status was part of the ancient Egyptian belief system, where pharaohs were considered gods on earth, embodiments of Horus in life and Osiris in death, connecting the people with the divine. Khufu's godlike reverence was reflected in the monumental scale and precision of the Great Pyramid, a testament to his power and divine protection. This structure, intended as his tomb, was built by a workforce that believed they were contributing to the eternal resting place of a god, ensuring his immortality and their own afterlife prospects. Worship practices including offerings and prayers to statues representing Khufu, asking for his divine favour and protection. Hayam Wuruk. Hayam Wuruk, the Maya-Payet Empire's most celebrated ruler, was revered by his subjects as a god-king, embodying the divine right to rule and the cosmic order. This deification of kings was a common practice in ancient Javanese culture, where the king was seen as a semi-divine figure, a direct intermediary between the spiritual and earthly realms. Hayam Wuruk's reign, marked by immense prosperity and territorial expansion, further cemented his divine status among his people. They believed his authority was ordained by the gods, and his decisions were imbued with spiritual significance. The epic poem Nagara Kretagama, written by the poet Prapanka in 1365, extols Hayam Wuruk's virtues and his divine lineage, reinforcing his godlike status. Maya-Payet subjects participated in elaborate rituals and ceremonies. This not only honoured Hayam Wuruk's sovereignty, but also venerated him as a divine presence on earth, showcasing their devotion and belief in his godlike nature. Alexander the Great. Alexander the Great, the Macedonian king who created an empire stretching from Greece to Egypt and into India, was considered a god by many of his subjects and contemporaries. This divine status was partly as a result of his own claims, influenced by Egyptian and Persian traditions of god-king rulers, and his desire to unify his vast empire under one ruler. Alexander was declared a son of Zeus by the Oracle of Amun in Siwa Oasis in Egypt, a title he embraced and propagated. This declaration was a significant factor in his deification. It validated his godhood in the eyes of his Greek and Egyptian subjects, blending with their religious beliefs. Examples of the belief in his divinity include the creation of cities in his name, such as Alexandria in Egypt, which became the centre of Hellenistic culture and worship of Alexander as a deity. Coins bearing his image were minted, further spreading his divine likeness across the empire. After his death, his successors continued to promote his cult, establishing temples and rituals dedicated to his worship, cementing his status as a god in the Hellenistic world. Emperor Jimmu. Emperor Jimmu is a legendary figure said to be Japan's first emperor and a direct descendant of the sun goddess Amaterasu, making him very special in Japan's stories and beliefs. He is part of Japan's ancient myths, showing how leaders and the divine are connected. Although it's not certain he really existed, as only old writings mention him and stories say he had godly parents, he is considered more than just a king. He is seen as a god king, meaning he was thought to have a divine right to rule Japan. This idea wasn't just for show. It deeply influenced how people respected the emperor and the ceremonies related to the royal family. For instance, the practice of Shinto, Japan's indigenous faith, involves rituals and festivals that honour the kami, or gods, including the imperial ancestors. Jimmu's godly status mandated that rituals and offerings be made to ensure his favour and the prosperity of the land he governed. Pharaoh Ramses II. Pharaoh Ramses II, one of Egypt's most powerful and revered rulers, was considered a deity by his people, embodying the divine essence and authority mandated by the gods. To honour his divinity, Egyptians engaged in elaborate rituals and ceremonies, built monumental temples like Abu Simbel, and dedicated vast resources to his worship. These temples served both as places of worship and as eternal houses for the pharaoh's spirit, ensuring his immortality. Ramses II's numerous military campaigns and monumental building projects were interpreted as manifestations of his divine will, reinforcing his godlike status among his people. His deeds were celebrated in poems and inscriptions, further immortalising his legacy as a god-king, demonstrating the Egyptians' profound belief in his divine nature and role. Sapa Inca Atahualpa. Sapa Inca Atahualpa, the last sovereign emperor of the Inca Empire before the Spanish conquest, was considered a god among his people due to the Incas' deeply ingrained religious beliefs and the divine status ascribed to their rulers. The Incas believed that their Sapa Inca was the son of the sun god Inti, which placed him not only at the pinnacle of their social and political hierarchy, but also embedded within their cosmology and religious practices. This divine status meant that Atahualpa was more than just a ruler. He was an intermediary between the cosmos and the earthly realm. In demonstrating their belief in his godlike status, the Incas engaged in elaborate ceremonies and rituals designed to honour him and the gods he represented. People would offer sacrifices, often in the form of animals, goods, or sometimes humans, to appease the gods and ensure the prosperity of their empire. Huangdi. Huangdi, known as the Yellow Emperor, is a legendary figure in Chinese history, often considered a deity and a progenitor of Chinese civilization. Revered as a godlike ruler, Huangdi's mythos symbolises the harmony between humanity and nature, and his reign is marked by significant cultural achievements, including the introduction of traditional Chinese medicine, the invention of the compass, and the establishment of a centralised state. His divinity was embraced through various forms of worship and rituals performed in his honour. Temples dedicated to Huangdi were built across China, where people would offer sacrifices and prayers, seeking blessings for prosperity, health, and protection. His supposed burial site at the Mausoleum of the Yellow Emperor in Shanxi has become a place of pilgrimage, especially during the Qingming festival, where people gather to pay homage to their ancestor, demonstrating the enduring legacy of his godlike status among the Chinese people. Pharaoh Amenhotep III. Pharaoh Amenhotep III, reigning in ancient Egypt during the 18th dynasty, was perceived as a living deity, a common belief towards pharaohs in Egyptian culture. This divine status was rooted in the concept of Ma'at, embodying truth, balance, and cosmic order, which pharaohs were thought to personify and maintain. Amenhotep III's godlike status was reinforced through monumental constructions and artworks, showcasing his connection to the gods, particularly Amun, the king of gods. His numerous statues, often colossal and placed at temple entrances, were not just representations, as in the case of Pharaoh Ramses II, but were believed to house his spirit, thus receiving offerings and prayers from the people. The lavish temples he built, like the Luxor temple, served not only as places of worship, but also as perpetual homes for his divine presence. Additionally, Amenhotep's extensive diplomatic marriages and foreign alliances were seen as earthly manifestations of his divine wisdom and power, further consolidating his deity status among his people. The Natchez rulers. The Natchez rulers, known as the Great Sons, were revered as divine entities by the Natchez people, a Native American group who inhabited the lower Mississippi Valley. Esteemed as living incarnations of the sun itself, the authority of the Great Sons extended over their society, positioning them at the apex of both the religious and political hierarchies. This divine kingship, a hereditary position passed through generations, manifested in the profound reverence the Natchez people held for their leaders, evident in their daily lives and cultural practices. For instance, the death of a great son prompted the ceremonial sacrifice of several of his servants, a testament to his perceived godlike status and their belief in his spiritual journey beyond death. Daily acts of homage and the provision of tributes by the Natchez people further emphasised the elevated status of the great sons. The Natchez rulers were revered within their community, not just as leaders but as gods among men. Through this system of governance, the continuity of divine kingship ensured that each new great son perpetuated the sacred relationship between the Natchez people and the cosmos. Pharaoh Akhenaten. Pharaoh Akhenaten of ancient Egypt, ruling during the 18th dynasty, was considered a deity in his own right by his people, a belief rooted in the ancient Egyptian concept of divine kingship. This perspective was notably intensified under Akhenaten's reign due to his revolutionary religious reforms, which centred on the worship of Aten, the sun disk, positioning himself as the sole intermediary between Aten and the people. This monotheistic shift disrupted centuries of polytheistic worship, emphasising the pharaoh's unique divine status. Examples of the populace's belief in Akhenaten's godhood can be seen in the art and inscriptions of the time, which depicted him with exaggerated, almost otherworldly features, symbolising his divine nature. People offered prayers and offerings to Aten, but did so through Akhenaten, effectively worshipping their pharaoh as a god on earth. Xerxes. Xerxes I, a prominent king of the Persian Achaemenid Empire, was revered with a godlike status by his subjects, a reflection of the divine right monarchy prevalent in ancient Persia. His reign from 486 BC until his assassination in 465 BC was marked by an imperial ideology that elevated the king above his people, not just as a ruler, but as a figure of worship. This perception was reinforced by the opulent display of wealth and power, such as the construction of monumental palaces at Persepolis, which served as a tangible representation of divine favour and authority. The reverence for Xerxes as a deity was manifested in several ways. Subjects prostrated themselves before him, a practice known as proskynesis, which was a form of worship reserved for deities in many cultures. This act symbolised the king's elevated status, blurring the lines between divinity and royalty. Furthermore, inscriptions and official communications often refer to him with titles that emphasised his divine appointment and inviolable authority. The royal propaganda, spread through the vast reaches of the empire, depicted Xerxes as chosen by Ahura Mazda, the supreme Zoroastrian god, further solidifying his godlike image among his people. Thanks for joining me on this fascinating journey into the lives of rulers who were seen as gods. If you liked what you saw and want to explore more incredible stories from history with me, please hit that like button and subscribe. Until next time, yours truly, Mythos, the Historian.